All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us. All right, so we're going to be talking about innovation in the face of crisis. We're not going to talk about the coronavirus itself. What prompted this webinar and why we decided to broadcast this is the situation that is around the world and specifically to our businesses within the veterinary industry. We pulled together 4 people that are entrepreneurs in the industry, and some of you know them. We're going to talk about this event through a strategic filter, focusing on establishment of a clear and consistent communication with the clients and employees. We're going to talk about mitigating employee and client risk, and we're going to talk about providing continuous veterinary care, which is our profession, to retain workforce and maintain revenue and margin. So the 4 guests that we invited today, I'll be facilitating the webinar. So my name is Ivan Zach, and you may know me as the founder of SmartFlow, or I worked at IDEX, and I co-host of Veterinary Innovation podcast. We have Julien Renard, who is the founder and the CEO of Vetstoria, the appointment booking app. We have Shawn Wilkie, who is my co-host and Veterinary Innovation podcast, serial entrepreneur, and the CEO of Talkatoo, voice recognition software. And we have Thom Jenkins, who is the CEO of PetsApp, the telemedicine application. I reside in Ukraine right now, usually in Canada, but I didn't make the last plane before the lockdown. So we are from 4 countries in the world. I'm in Ukraine, Julien's in Belgium, and Thom is in the UK, and Shawn is from Canada. We're going to open up with a section talking about communications and what we can do from technology perspective. We're going to have Julien share his perspective on this. And Julien, please go.
Hi, everyone. So the communication, we can, I would say, easily classify this into 2 types. You have the practice internal communication and the external communication, which is communicating with your clients. So I'm just going to describe during my time these 2 types of communication. So the first one, practice internal communication, the objective will be to maintain a communication flow between your staff member while some of these staff members are staying at home. The second objective, and very important, is to have things done. So what tool can you use at your practice to do that? So the first set of tools are simple chat tool, and we have 2 options out there. You can use tools who are built for corporate needs, and Slack, for example, is one of the main ones, but you also have Microsoft Teams. These tools are extremely useful in the current context. So first of all, Slack is free. Well, actually, there is a free version that you can use, and very likely to suit the basic need of your practice. You can use Microsoft Teams. It's included in your bundle, or it's bundled into Office 365 if you have it. And the big benefit of this tool is you are going to be able to have a one-to-one interaction with your staff member, but also you'll be able to create groups. So on the slide that Ivan is showing, you might be able to create groups for receptionists, for, let's say, your manager, for potentially a group to deal with complaint. Very, very important to maintain the perimeter of this conversation within Slack. Now, one of the big benefits also of this tool is that you'll be able to police the usage of this. And my recommendation is to do that from the very, very early stage. What you will have to do is 2 things. First of all, defining what will be the client personal data usage policy. So question, are you going to allow your staff member to display personal data, or well, to actually to write the name, the personal data of your client on these tools. You have to decide. If you decide to allow your staff to do so, you will have, and especially if you're in Europe, you will have to amend your privacy policy, because Slack will become a tool, a sub-processor tool. So you will have to make sure that you amend your privacy policy, but it's something which is very, very important in the GDPR context. If you decide not to do so, you don't have to actually change that, but you will have to ban any personal data to be displayed within the tool. Another rule which is also very important when it comes to using this tool will be to actually define clearly what will be the outbound versus inbound flow of information. As I say, you can use this group to maintain some conversation. However, you can't allow all conversation to be shared with anyone. So, for example, you might allow a broad communication across all your staff, but if your staff member is, not happy about something, it would be really appropriate if the staff member was sharing this information with everyone. So just make sure that every staff member understands how to use it. It's very simple, but set up the rule from the start. Now, the second tool that I recommend to use to maintain the personal relationship used to entertain when you're at the practice is simply what we are using now, a video tool, and that will enable and that will allow you to maintain this personal relationship that you have with your employee and co-worker. The third type of tools are project management tool. Simply, the goal is to have things done. Break down a goal into tasks, allocate tasks to team members, and set up a timeline, and it will give you much more chance to achieve your goal. So tools such as Asana, Ivan is showing on the screen, this is very, very advanced tool. There is a free version, very likely that will suit the need of your practice. You can also use Trello. And the beauty of these tools is so they can also be integrated with the chat tool I was mentioning before, for example, Slack. So yeah, project management tool, very, very important, will help you to have things done. So we just discussed the first part, which was all about communicating internally. I move to the second part, which is the external communication. Or are you going to communicate with your clients? So the objective would be to, first of all, reassuring them that they can still access pet health care, and also explaining them how they can access your service during this time. The messaging should be, COVID-19 is here. We treat your pet health very, very seriously, and it's a top priority. The second message is that we are still here for your pet. We are going to deliver the service we can, and this is how we can help. And the third objective will be to, the third type of message should be, it can change at any time. We don't know what's going to happen in 2-3 days. Stay connected, follow us. So that's really the three types of messaging I'm recommending to put you out there. So where and how can you can you have this message out there? These two, I would say, type of channel, and maybe Ivan, you can put back this slide on if you don't mind. Do you have it? I don't see it. I can't hear you, but that's okay.
Are you looking for the website slide?
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah, it's on.
Cool. Okay, so the first, the type of channel of communication, first, passive. Very obvious one, your website. We want to simply display a banner, so you can see a website here of a UK clinic. They display clearly the COVID-19 message. You can't miss it. You can go to the next slide, Ivan. Now, all can access the service. So this practice decided that they want to offer telemedicine. You can clearly see it's a message which is very important for the next few months. They clearly display that on their website. Third slide. Potentially, if you offer, in the case of online booking, for example, you want to clearly display your message where clients are booking. I think I can see some picture of your holiday, Ivan.
I know. That's right.
Ivan.
Keep going, Julien.
So the website was the first passive channel of communication. The second one, very important, Google My Business. My recommendation, make sure that you have your opening hours adjusted. If for some reason you have some temporary closure, mark it down. There is a COVID-19 special feed that Google has introduced. You can adjust that yourself. And also you can make some posts from Google My Business. They are highly visible from your client, super easy to do it. Yelp, there is a COVID-19 advisor message too, very simple to do. And the last channel of communication, of passive communication, are the social media. Facebook, change your Facebook, what do you call that, cover photo, very simple to do. If you don't want to go back to the previous slide, Ivan. So the cover photo, very easy to do, change it. If you don't know what message to put out there, if you're not really if you don't have a designer in-house, you can go on simplydonesocial.com. There's plenty of very good content there that you can pick up and implement on your Facebook page. You can also use tools such as Canva. It works very well, super easy to design your own content. So that was the passive channel. Now, if we move to the active channel of communication, over there we have also social media. Once again, Facebook, you can post active content, obviously, and you can even pin it on top of the page to make it more visible. Use email. Most of the PIMs out there have built-in email feature. Email your client, explaining them your key message. You can also use tools such as MailChimp. It's a very good tool, very simple. I think up to 2,000 users, it's free. Use that. SMS, simply, once again, communicate again using this channel. You can do it from your PIMs, but also there are tools out there that are doing that. Your reminder provider might be a very good help for this situation. There are companies out there such as iRecall, Pet Desk, Vet2Pet, Pet Test Network Pro. All these companies are providing very good service when it comes to reminder. Use them to actually put this kind of message out there. And the last category would be the application, which are already used by clients. They are already in their pocket. Is a perfect channel to push message through push notification and making sure that they access this information. Okay, so the conclusion of this is, and probably the most important thing is, if you want this to work, it will have to be led by someone who will be designed as the project owner. If there is no project owner, it will not happen. So design someone who will be in charge and make sure that the rest of the team will be involved and will be made accountable. That's pretty much really the conclusion of the first part.
All right, thanks, Julien. So now we're going to move on. So what the conclusion of this is, it's very important to first establish communication. You guys have all been coming to work and talking with each other. So now that you're distributing the team, partially distributing the team, plus you need to update your staff about the crisis and how the lockdowns as different country unfold. In Ukraine, it happened much earlier than, let's say, in England, and much earlier than in the US. So that's the communication. Now we need to take care of our employees as well as clients. So Thom will open up with the discussion around employee and client safety.
Yeah, thank you, Ivan, and thanks, Julien. Just to say that I'm a vet and I've operated veterinary groups in both Asia and Europe, so completely empathize with the situation that a lot of you will be in right now. And it seems our mission needs to be about maintaining our patient advocacy efforts while preserving human health and well-being. And we all know that pets are a contributor to human health and well-being, so this does all link together. However, there's no escaping the fact that we are all juggling the often competing needs of various stakeholders in what is already an incredibly operationally complex business. Human health, I think, has to be the absolute priority here, and employers, as I'm sure they do, need to take seriously the duty of care they have for their clinic teams as well as their clients. I would say it's not all bad news. We are at something of an advantage in our sector in that we're experts in sterility and hygiene, and we are used to dealing with infectious diseases. That said, these are exceptional circumstances that require exceptional measures. We should not be complacent or resting on our laurels by any means, and we will need to do things that we have never done before, including social distancing where possible, remote consultations, digital payments, having team members work from home, all that kind of stuff. Remember that anyone that can work from home should work from home, and it's particularly important to protect your vulnerable team members. In many ways, this group has been the vanguard in veterinary clinics establishing just what remote working can be like, and I think we've surprised ourselves in the sector by how much can be done remotely and how much can be done from home. And so hopefully, once we're through the worst of this, that's a positive lesson that we can learn and apply. Obviously, urgent care still needs to be delivered for our patients, but social distancing procedures should be observed as far as possible. We're not just talking about social distancing from clients, from pet owners coming into the clinic. Think about how your team are going to collaborate in the care of patients in clinics, and to what extent it's possible to socially distance some of the work that they're doing. But is it really possible to restrain an animal for a colleague while respecting social distancing? If that's possible to do, even if that was possible to do the practical realities of your clinic allow this to happen? What about surgery? What about a GDV dog? Personal protective equipment, PPE, is going to help, sure, but we should be using that judiciously, of course. And think about lifting the dog onto the table, that sort of stuff. So given social distancing is unlikely to be viable in every case, how are you going to mitigate this risk? You should maybe think about putting your staff into small self-contained groups with separate shifts, with social distancing between those shifts and remote handover of patients. Don't just throw up your hands because it's not possible in every case. Risk assess each piece of work being conducted in the clinic and social distance or conduct remotely where it's possible. So yeah, there might be some team members that have to be in close contact. Well, limit the number of contacts that they have. And those team members that don't need to be in close contact, think about maybe lab work or something like that, socially distance where you can. The Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons here in the UK have specifically advised the use of technology to triage cases in order to determine what needs to be seen in person in clinic and what can be dealt with remotely. Remember, in this case, you are also reviewing the health status of the owner to help risk assess. If they're showing symptoms of COVID, that comes in to assessment of whether that patient can be seen. And ultimately, you need to decide what steps you're going to take to risk mitigate. Ivan, I've just put up a slide from the BSAVA. They've provided a very useful tool to determine what's urgent and what's not urgent. And there's a link there, www.bsava.com/triage tool. I think that's really helpful, and I'm sure there's similar tools. The BSAVA I saw earlier just on social media had said they're happy to make this available in a Word document where people in international contexts can apply to their specific jurisdiction, which I think is super helpful as well. And so in terms of in practice, what kind of risk mitigation steps could you take to protect the health of your teams and your clients? Obviously, you should be considering remote consultation. Even when a patient needs to be seen in practice, consider remote admit consults and remote discharge consults. Digital payments is something you should certainly be looking into, certainly not cash if at all possible. I know that, again, here in the UK, the contactless payment limit has been increased to facilitate cashless payments. And these sorts of steps all have the benefit of reducing the time that each pet owner is spending in the waiting room, so reducing that contact time. As I've hinted at already, you might want to consider splitting your clinic team into 2 or more groups where viable. 1 work from home, 1 staffs the clinic. If the clinic staff are infected or have to self-isolate for whatever reason, you have a backup crew available. This backup staff means, this backup team means your current staff will not feel under pressure to not report when they are showing symptoms. And that's really important. You don't want anyone being a hero here. You don't want them feeling they have to battle on in the face of symptoms. This does not help anyone. And it presents a very serious risk. So anything you can do to reassure people, encourage people to let you know about their own health status. Importantly, sort of relating to what Julien said, you should be keeping track of and stay in touch with all of your team. Don't forget your duty of care to your employees just because you're not seeing them every day. This is a situation where you want over communication. Not only is this the right thing to do, but who knows when you might need these people. Look at how you're going to track internal moves, consider what locum requirements you might have. It may be that you're overstaffed in some areas and massively understaffed in others. It's part of the unpredictable nature of the current environment. More than ever, as I've said, over communication is just absolutely required. And it's important that you give your team the tool to collaborate in the care of their patients in a joined up way. Both your remote team and then clinic team should be able to collaborate on cases, handing off to each other as necessary. Technology can facilitate this. And the final consideration I'd just like to highlight here is, again, the judicious use of personal protective equipment and oxygen. It's not just veterinary teams and pet owners in play here. This is a societal effort that we all have to take seriously. So yeah, in terms of employees and client safety, I hope that's sort of a helpful overview.
Great, thanks for that, Thom. So now that we discussed the safety of our clients as well as our staff, I think there is one note that we discussed when we were preparing for this. If you're assessing health of your clients as well as pets, please use different thermometers. That's a joke just to make it a little lighter here. So now we're going to move on to the providing continuous veterinary care. So we want to make sure that we run our business, that we provide the job to our employees, and that our businesses survive through these crises. So I will have Shawn talk about how to maintain existing technologies and access them from the remote environment. Shawn?
Great, thanks, Ivan. And thanks everybody for being here. Julien and Thom, thanks for all of the effort that you guys have put in. And the team behind the Veterinary Innovation Podcast has been working tirelessly to kind of get this information out. So it's great to have this many people on live chat. Do us a favor if you don't mind, subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure you subscribe to our podcast. We'll be continuing to push information like this in the coming weeks. So there's a couple of things that I wanted to chat about. You know, they're very uncertain times, depending on where in the world you're at. Veterinary care has been designated an essential service in some places, and in other cases, veterinary clinics have closed completely. And I think that the interesting perspective that we've got in our group, having people around the world, is to see the things that are happening in different countries around the world, depending on how the country is adapting to the situation. So, you know, it's an essential service today, and I hope that it stays that way. But I think it's also very important to plan for the case that it may not be, and that you may need to access all of your tools from home. So what does that mean, or what am I even talking about? So in a lot of cases, veterinary medicine is still very much the server in the business that needs to be accessed while you're at the business. If you find yourself in this category where the only way you can get access to your PIMs is by being in your physical location, I think it's very important to look at some tools to mitigate that risk. If imagine you're not able to go to the clinic and you need to access the PIMs for client information. At this point, it's very important to look at some remote tools. So there's 3 remote tools that will allow you to remotely access both your server and any individual desktops in the clinic. And Ivan, I'll get you to go to the next slide. So the 3 remote controls that I want to highlight are AnyDesk, which is probably the most affordable remote access tool, TeamViewer, and LogMeIn. There's many other tools, and we're not getting paid to recommend these. I actually personally use AnyDesk. It's a very inexpensive and great way to access your machines remotely. I've used both TeamViewer and LogMeIn. So this is the consequence of a live event. Somebody's at my front door. I apologize for that. So AnyDesk is a great tool. TeamViewer is a great tool, and LogMeIn. I've used all of them. If you are not familiar with these tools, lean on your IT resources, whether that's an internal IT resource or an external IT resource. Lean on those providers to help you set these tools up. The next thing that I want to highlight is phone systems. So if you're not able to access the clinic for whatever reason, any telephone system can be forwarded to a cell phone. So all you need to do in order to make that happen is call your telephone provider and have them walk you through that. Alternatively, there's a lot of great web-based phone systems on the market today. And a few that I recommend looking at if you're trying to figure out a way to allow or manage phone system connectivity well in a remote or a fully remote environment or partially remote environment is things like Ring Central, Weave, and Dialpad. All great tools and all have the availability to allow some of your remote staff to facilitate or to work as part of your team, even though they're not in the same location. So all of these tools are great. They're all very affordable. And if you combine these tools with tools that Julien mentioned in the communication section, like Slack or Microsoft Teams, you can really get to the point with using, group communication facility tools like Teams or Slack in conjunction with remote access tools and phone systems. You can really set your clinic up to be almost, fully operational from the tools and the ability to provide these solutions. But obviously you're going to have these other big burdens of not being able to touch and care for animals the same way that you do today. And it's our interest to provide you with a grouping of these tools, all which will be available via a PDF that we'll make available at the end of the webinar. So we're not just going to give you a bunch of tools without links. We'll give you links to the tools and other things that we've put together for this webinar as a resource. And obviously we'll be here to ask questions or answer questions at the end of the webinar. So thanks everybody for joining. Look forward to your questions at the end, and Ivan, back to you.
Thanks for that, Shawn. So now we talked about maintaining your business operations through communication, then keeping your clients and your staff safely, and then we talked about accessing the systems that already exist in the hospital. Now, the second part of this sort of technology section and keeping the business afloat, we want to talk about rapid deployment of new systems, technologies, or new workflows, which is by far actually most important, not just the tools, but the workflows. And I have Thom joining us again to talk about that.
So thanks, Ivan. I think, as I've said, in terms of keeping the business afloat, we need to seek opportunities to maintain our patient advocacy efforts. And a lot of this is going to be digital patient advocacy. Pet owners are at home spending much more time with their pets than usual. They'll be spotting more pet issues and have questions that may not otherwise have surfaced. I just had a clinic group using PetsApp the other day call me and say, look, in some ways, there are positive stories here. There was a dog at home, had a cardiac event. Usually their owners would not have been at home to spot that and take the dog immediately to the clinic. In any other circumstances, they would have come home to a deceased pet. So there is that side of things, and clearly some of our natural reflexes in terms of patient advocacy are going to be inappropriate here. For example, preventive dentistry involves an in-clinic visit and use of personal protective equipment that probably just isn't appropriate in the current context. If pet issues are to be serviced by veterinary expertise, you need to ensure you have systems in place to do this, and where possible, remotely. Fortunately, there are a plethora of technology companies operating in the pet care sector. Ivan, if you just want to show the slide from the Next Web, they sort of did a map of, I just saw this come up on LinkedIn, they did a map of startup innovation in the pet care industry. And clearly there are these companies that have been innovating for many years in this space, and you can sort of take your pick of which solutions you go for. If you do not already have such digital solutions in place, then projects that otherwise would have taken you weeks or months to implement are now going to have to be delivered in days, if not hours. We've certainly seen telemedicine and digital client communication rollouts deployed successfully to much pet owner applause, I will add, within hours at clinic groups within the last couple of weeks. And it's through no small effort of those clinic teams, but they're just having to adapt the way they're doing their jobs. I think there are two key things to achieve this. The first one is embrace the imperative for change while over communicating. So, you know, it's almost trite to say that most people, most of the time, are change averse. However, in the current climate, people will understand the imperative for change if you explain the reasons for your actions to them. This is about protecting health, protecting animal welfare, yes, but also protecting jobs. Pet owners and pets will need us when all of this is over. It's important that we implement the changes necessary to ensure we get through to that point. The second point I'd say is resist the temptation to exceptionalize. We've all seen the sessions on telemedicine at the large veterinary conferences, endless sessions on the ethics of telemedicine, and yet we don't see so many talks on the ethics of the veterinary phone call. It's natural, it's a nice buzzword, a shiny new piece of jargon to throw around and pontificate on. But if you want to create a whole new set of protocols, processes, and procedures around this new, brave new world, you're never going to be able to implement at the pace you and your clients and patients need. The wonderful thing is that the route to most successful implementation involves doing exactly the opposite. We're talking about digitally augmenting the products and services that your clinic already offers. This means finding the parallel protocol or procedure for how you would do something in the physical domain and applying that as closely as possible to the virtual domain, whether that's video consults, text chats, digital payments, push notifications, or whatever. And I will just add, a lot of the focus has been on video consultation at the minute, understandably, and it's super important, but you also want to think about ways to continue that engagement to keep your digital patient advocacy efforts going. This might not, you know, be over anytime soon. You know, obviously we all hope it is, but it might not be, and we need to be prepared to keep our digital patient advocacy efforts going rather than it being a one and done video consult interaction. When we think about this at PetsApp, we're thinking about role-based text chat, push notifications, but also email, social media, SMS campaigns, the whole lot. You've got to throw everything at this. Back over to you, Ivan.
Thanks for that, Thom. So, so in a summary and with some takeaways, I just want to go back into the outline of these slides that we had on the screen. Basically, the way we're thinking about the strategy during this time is, one, you have to maintain communication with both your clients and employees. It has to be the outbound where they can hear you with the rapid updates, as well as inbound. You need to hear the voice of your employees when they're not at home, they're creating certain tasks, or there is any concerns that they have. Everybody's concerned about their employment. Am I going to lose my job? Is the clinic going to close? All of these things need to be rapidly updated. Set up the cadence. Make sure that they know when is the next contact due. When you have a weekly meeting, have a morning stand-up. Someone suggested on the chat there, do an evening checkout, which is very important. So communication is the key because people are scared. They need to know more information, and it needs to come from you as an employer and as the professional in our industry. Then second thing is the employee and client risk to become contaminated or infected with the coronavirus. So obviously not the patients, but the employees, especially those that are at risk. So determine the risks based on what we know already about coronavirus. I'm not going to dive into those. You can find them in a more appropriate sources, but just make sure that you know who's at most risk. Then basically you want to make sure that you continue providing veterinary care as a professional. So you have to address the urgent situations. Veterinary medicine is considered essential service, at least in North America. And we should definitely focus on providing this care, whether people are at home or if they need to come into clinic. And then the other thing is that we need to access our system. So if you're considering deploying something new, like telemedicine, for example, everybody's talking about telemedicine. Think about current workflows and the conditions that you're addressing. What is your workflow in the clinic, and try to transpose that onto telemedicine. Not all the platforms right now mimic your behavior. They are made to augment your services. So right now we don't have services in the clinics, and some of them. The lockdown in Ukraine is as such that everything is closed. So people are not even allowed to come on the street, or in Germany, in Austria, I think also. And it may be the same case in Canada and US soon. So make sure that you can access your system. So if you're providing a telemedicine consult, how important it is to access your medical records from the past. And then now that the VCPR laws are a little bit weakened. So you can, again, don't quote me on this, but look up your local jurisdiction and the Veterinary Association, and then follow those regulations. They're updated rapidly, so follow the American Association, Veterinary Association, Canadian Veterinary Association, whatever jurisdiction you're in. So make sure you access the information, and then also make sure that you have access to payment systems and things like that. Think through the whole workflow. And then when you're deploying new systems, as Thom said, don't try to create something completely new. Look at the workflows that you already have and incorporate technology where you can augment what is now remote. So basically, let's say you're rolling out telemedicine. Think about, so just to go through it, think that you need to book an appointment. You need somehow to see that the appointment is coming. You need to notify the doctors. You can't just yell from the reception to the back. They need to know. So which calendars they're accessing. Are they looking at your PIMs, or are you booking them into the Google calendars now? And when they come to the appointment, make sure they have access to the appointments, whether through telemedicine, Zoom, or Google Hangouts, whatever you're using. And then think about the appointment. So if they conduct an appointment that needs the follow-up procedures, such as blood work, or any manipulations, or any other diagnostics like X-ray, do send them back to the hospital, or what are the next steps? And then think about how you're going to collect the payment, and most important, how do you record the medical records after that? Do they stay in the system that you're using? Are they integrated into your practice management system? Or can you then create just a simple GDoc and then share it with a reception while they're still in the hospital, and they can copy paste it into your practice management system if you don't have remote access? Just think through the whole workflow in the system. So I'm gonna make this little announcement here before we start answering the questions. We will have a follow-up episode of Veterinary Innovation Podcast, where we will invite Dr. Erica Carroll, who prepared quite a robust article, and she's going to share it after that. It's about the employee utilization and workflow for veterinary clinics during the COVID-19. It's a super interesting article. I invited her to our webinar. It's going to be recorded next week. And we're going to do it as a follow-up to this webinar. But now I'm going to switch to answering the questions. So please post them on the YouTube channel. Please subscribe. We're going to be deploying some news through this channel as well. And then now we're going to dive into the questions that our tech assistant accumulated in the chat here. So let me just dive into those. I'm going to assign a couple of folks to them. So number one, how often do you recommend emailing clients updates? Guys, who wants to take that one? I'm going to start calling you out on this.
Yeah, I'll take it up. I think, the one thing that we've all seen is that our inboxes are clogged with COVID-19 updates. So I think make sure that you're communicating things that need to be communicated. Once a week is probably not too much, but any more than that, unless you're communicating things that are critical for your customers to know, I think is important. And Thom, go ahead and append to what I'm saying.
So I just want to say, I think it's good for you to respect the communication preferences of your clients. So some people will want you to use email, some people will prefer text. Be as adaptable as you can to their communication preferences, and don't expect your clients to switch channels based on what is convenient for you.
Excellent, thank you. So the second question that we have, are people using short daily debriefs at all to touch base with the team, such as using Zoom, Skype, Google Hangouts? Julien, you're on the distributed team. How do you run your operations? Do you have morning, afternoon touch base? How do you do it?
Well, we used to do that in the office every day in the morning. Now we are doing this through Zoom every morning, 8:45. The whole team is there. We have the same meeting early afternoon with the US team. And at the end of the day, in the project management tool we are using, everybody is meant to just leave 3 or 4 lines of what they've been achieved today, what's their potential blocker, and what they would be doing tomorrow. The key element here, I think, is preparing this a little bit. So everybody's got things in their mind that they want to discuss during this daily standard meeting in the morning. I would strongly suggest to prepare a hit list where everybody can just drop there what they think they would like to discuss in the morning. So at least the daily stand-up is prepared and there's a bit of structure. But yeah, we had to do this. It's working pretty well.
Ivan, I'd also say one of the things that we've done at the Talkatoo team to stay connected, because we're all used to working together every day, is we have a once a week hangout. We're actually having beers over video chat to kind of stay connected as a
Same,
team.
yeah.
And it's been really helpful. It's been really helpful to not feel isolated from the people that I really like working with. So I think it seems like a silly idea, but for us, it's been really great.
Sounds like it's for people that like drinking together, not working. Just kidding. No, that's excellent. I mean, I heard a lot of people actually having these parties over the internet somehow. I just want to contribute to that as well. I mean, I ran the distributed teams for last 7 years, and it is super important to create the environment and where you feel that you're a part of the community. You have a social component. So in our Slack channel, we have series channels where we deploy the news. There's certain rules around them, just like Julien said. And there's a general channel where there's no garbage allowed, but we have a garbage channel that's called For Shits and Giggles. That's literally the name. So people can post whatever they want. There are little giffies, there are jokes, and whatever they want to post. Everybody's subscribed to that. Seems to be the most favorite channel for some reason, but that does allow for series channels to be uncluttered. So for the meetings, I like what Julien recommended, preparing the agenda. The one thing that I asked, not just for the online meetings with the whole team, but for even one-on-ones with the team, before we come to the meeting, if there's no agenda written down in the calendar, I'm not showing up, because there's no reason to show up if it's me providing a monologue. We're meeting to solve some sort of a problem, and then we want to know what problem is about. So that's a good way to put it. But having a place and a shared place, like a Google Doc or a note shared through all iMessages and stuff like that, is important, because throughout the day you have some questions accumulate. You don't have to throw them immediately through the chat messages, because people are working at their desk. I always say, think about like I'm sitting in my office. You wouldn't write to my office and open the door every 5 minutes asking me a question. You would probably be a little more considerate and you would approach it. So my Zoom is literally my office. And then when I meet with a team member, then they have questions prepared and we go through them. So that's a good practice. So let's answer this question. How can we make sure that employees do check the communication messages we distribute? Thom.
So I think this is where normal principles of line management really come into play. And it's about setting expectations. And those expectations need to be reciprocal. So you need to communicate very clearly to your team members what you expect of them, and checking communication messages on a regular basis is part of that expectation, but also communicate what they can expect of you. And I think at this time, more regular check-ins, as we've already talked about, are super important. I mean, I always schedule weekly one-to-ones with my direct reports. Well, right now we're talking multiple times a day, as well as having those weekly check-ins. So it shouldn't be a mystery to you whether or not someone is in the loop. It's not send the email and done. Yes, there's always an element of willful ignorance, but also there's a lot going on right now, so people might miss these communications. So there is an expectation on the part of the line manager to check in for understanding with the person that they're managing on their team.
Julien, you wanted to share something as well? So yeah, I agree with that, Thom. I think that I think there's two strategies. There's one, there are tools, and I saw someone suggested, I think Rebecca Rose, thank you for being active communication there. But one of the things, some tools allow you to actually ask people to annotate that they read the message. I've done that. So if it's a general channel where we deploy SOPs, we actually have a channel that's called SOPs, the least favorite channel. But because it's the least favorite channel, everybody's rule, so that's the policy, that every time we deploy something there, every single person on the team has to write their name. You can make it a little more fun. So in Slack channel, you can add some emojis to it, just like on any other social. So you can actually say, just with emoji, check that you read the message.
How did you establish that SOP?
To do that? Yeah, you couldn't do it because we didn't have an SOP. You're right. But it was an agreement that we would just throw an emoji, and people were having fun with it. It's, throwing GIFs and stuff, but that does the job. And then when you're having someone not comply with it, you can simply go back to this channel and say you didn't read it or you read it. Well, what's the problem? Because it's there. So I think it's new to people, but it's possible. And then again, establishing the expectation. So right now, we're deploying the email, new corporate email in one organization. It is the role to make that channel of communication your primary. Right now is the time, more than at any times, that any change management will be very important to people. Because in the past, you may have deployed your email and everybody says, screw you, I'm not reading my email. Right now, if you make it important and say, this is how you hear about your job existence, whether we closed the doors and went bankrupt, about updates about whether you're gonna get sick, there's a sense of urgency there to check that email. So to use this time right now, I think appropriately, these crises could be used as a very important tool of change management with less resistance, because people are focused on what they're doing more than before, and any change management that will help to deal with this will probably settle in the business as new workflows. And this is what I think about telemedicine. I think that telemedicine may become a huge part of our veterinary medicine in the future, because we now will be forced to create workflows to work with it. And when this will pass, I think that that will give a new birth to this channel of providing telemedicine.
I also want to add a little bit there, just one final point. We've noticed at our team at Talkatoo that everybody's much more committed to work. They want to help, they want to be part of this. And so leveraging these tools, setting them up to allow people that are maybe forced to be remote or that are not in the clinic, I think you'll be surprised to see how much your team wants to contribute. The alternative is Netflix and chill, and I think we're all getting a little tired of that.
Thanks, John. So another question that we have, how to convince the doctors what they think is urgent is really not. A lump that hasn't changed in new puppies, vaccines, etc. I know that Thom wants to answer it, but I'm usually struggling with convincing the client is what they think not urgent is, like 5 days vomiting blood. But Thom, if you want to take that one.
No, you're definitely right there, Ivan. I think the whole world is sort of turned on its head, and it's a strange problem to have, hey? But I think that's where reference to third-party resources is super helpful. So looking at what the British Small Animal Veterinary Association have produced around defining what is urgent and what isn't, and referencing this. So it's not just you saying it, it's a third party is helping to establish these guidelines. I think that's powerful.
Yeah, thanks for that, Thom. So we have next question, how to maintain employees when your business have a drop of 50% in the income? Ooh, who wants to take that one? Thom.
I think it is looking at revenue rescuing measures. And I know I keep saying this, but adjusting your patient advocacy efforts and looking at non-obvious opportunities. So for example, the fact that people are at home with their pets, the Veterinary Innovation Council says that only 8% of all pet issues are addressed by veterinary expertise. That means historically, the people best placed to address pet issues have been missing out on 92% of all pet issues. Maybe it's time we started to look at those issues and found ways to digitally advocate on behalf of our patients concerning those issues. And to give you an example, people at home with their pets might notice that Daisy is having trouble getting up on the couch. And maybe that's a good conversation to have around osteoarthritis. In fact, maybe that's an SMS text message or push notification campaign you can run today saying, is Daisy, is pet's name, having trouble getting up on the couch? And engage them in a conversation about something that you otherwise would not have had the opportunity to talk to them about. I think those sort of revenue rescuing campaigns, it's an opportunity here.
Thanks, Thom. Shawn, you had something to add to that?
Yeah, I think the one important thing to look at too is look at all of the programs that are available by federal, state, provincial governments. Leverage some of them. In Canada, there's a 75% wage subsidy for any small business, which veterinary clinics included, that drop below a 30% drop in their revenue. So the Canadian government's doing some very interesting things. There's things that are being done in America and all over Europe. Look in, find ways to rescue and protect and shore up the ship. Everything's different all of a sudden. But I think Thom's point is really well taken, which is try to think outside the box, try to stay positive, and try to find opportunities to solve these issues.
So I think that in addition to that, look up how to immigrate to Canada if you're outside of Canada, and then to leverage those. Thom, go ahead.
Or if you're stuck in the Ukraine as a Canadian citizen, try to get your ass home.
I think international travel is not to be encouraged. Anyway, do lean on your suppliers too. Cash is king at the minute, and you need to do everything you can to preserve cash flow. But suppliers will be looking for ways to be supportive of the businesses that they serve. So having sort of proactive conversations with them, just fully encourage that.
Great, thanks for that, Thom. So the next question that we have is, most bigger companies have a division that focuses on a new rollout. It often takes months. As a small operation of less than 20 people, implementing a rollout of telemedicine is tough. So I probably will contribute to this one. I think that the fact that you have 20 people is probably making it a little easier. It's all about planning, and just dropping telemedicine onto the team and say, hey, here's the tool, is not going to work. You need to think about the workflow, and you need to think, if you're a manager or if you're a clinician, think about how you were rolling out, how the appointments were taken in the hospital, and then think if you can mimic that with maybe a receptionist working from home, and then the doctor being online, and then maybe you establish your team or 2 people in the hospital that are less exposed or at less risk, younger staff staying in the hospital and doing diagnostics, maybe x-rays and blood work. So then you can book an appointment with the receptionist from home on the phone into your PIMs if you have access, or Google Calendar. The doctor is watching that calendar, Zoom link attached to Google Calendar, and then they click in, they have appointments, which we've never seen appointments on telemedicine less than more than 10-15 minutes. They're actually much shorter. And then after that, after the conversation history, then you can send them to the hospital to just collect blood work, and then where they can actually pay for the services, hopefully with the tap. You now completed the workflow. So think just like if you were rolling out anything new. I bet you bought new dental equipment or your x-ray machine or something. How do you roll it out? Make sure that there's 3 components. And this is from sort of lean methodology, but anything that I incorporate in any organization I work, there's 3 segments. You build, so you design and build, then you measure of what the results are, and then you learn from it, and then you iterate again. So Thom, you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, it is possible, and you're right. The leaner teams have a strategic advantage here in that they can make decisions and move pretty quickly, and the training and onboarding is quicker. But we're onboarding clinics within hours, and the key is not to exceptionalize and do exactly what you've said there. Get your receptionists on there, get your veterinary nurses on there, get your veterinarians on there. Look for a complete solution that can digitally augment and extend the existing operations. That's really what you want to be doing.
Julien, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to add one thing to what you said, Ivan, and to Thom. I think for me, the PIMs of a practice is a central piece of the digital activity. That's where vets are recording their notes, appointments are booked, receptionist book appointment, the practice manager does the accounting potentially. I think that the key rule is that all the information which are happening in all these tools which now start to be used, all the information needs to end up in the PIMs. Otherwise, in a few months when we are waking up from this crisis, we are going to have information will be separated in between tools, and that will potentially be a big problem for practices. So for me, keeping the data in the PIMs is a key element.
Thank you. And I'm watching actually some chat rolling here, and as Kate Morris said, we just launched PetsApp this AM, 24 hours turnaround. Amazing. Thanks, Thom. So
thank you. Thank you. I didn't pay anyone to say that, I promise.
You'll have to pay me. Hey.
Shout out to Ricky, who was working on that. That wasn't me. So shout out to Ricky. Awesome. Full credit to him.
So the next question is, can we have the link to that journal article to download by Dr. Erica Carroll? It's not published yet. Hopefully she will publish it somewhere. We are interviewing Dr. Erica Carroll next week, and it's going to be an interview on this article, and it's going to be our podcast at Veterinary Innovation Podcast. So please subscribe to this channel. I still see only a few subscribers, and that's where you also will get the news. And when we will deploy the podcast, we will send the article. It also probably is going to go through a couple of social media channels, because there is a few friends of hers that asked to deploy it. So just she's just finalizing it actually again with a couple tweaks. Next question, we have 6 more minutes, guys. So we keep hearing from veterinary practices that they're worried about missing a chunk of their revenue from preventative medicine. Do you guys have any recommendations for practices at this time? So I'll throw my 2 cents. Being an emergency vet, don't know much about the preventative medicine. Just kidding. But I think that there are things, vaccines are probably not essential thing that has to be done today, but there's no need to skip on parasiticides. Any medications that could be prescribed, you can do it through implementing online pharmacy. You can still look through the appointments that are due if people are coming in for something other than the vaccines. If you're updating something else, all of those things could be sent through the online pharmacy. And I think that's one of those innovative things where you can retain your revenue. Make a phone call, make a telemedicine appointment, make just a phone appointment. Just call them at the time and say, hey, we're not seeing the patient, but I do want to talk to you. Collect the history over the phone, and then connect to online pharmacy and send the medication. Send it from your hospital. Don't use even the online pharmacy. But those that don't require handling or meeting in person, I think there's some things that we can do. Even adult check, and then so you can interview the client for the history. The next one we have benefits of Weave versus Slack for team communication. I never use Weave. I use Slack in the last 3 companies actually. And Weave is something new to me. I thought it's more texting. There's specialists. Shawn.
Yeah, I can give a little bit of color to that. So Weave does have a built-in kind of group messaging comparison thing. I think the thing that's different from Slack versus Weave is the idea of channels. Ivan referenced those before. The reality is, if you've got a tool like Weave that facilitates that need, don't go run off and change it. Try to leverage what you have. And there'll be comparisons. If you do a Google search Weave versus Slack, you'll get all kinds of things because they are different tools. Weave's primary objective is telephony. Slack's is group communication.
Thanks, Shawn. The next question that we have, what price point would you recommend positioning telemedicine consultation at relative to conventional face-to-face consults? Thom, go ahead.
So this is an interesting one, and it's changing. We see a range of price points, and we certainly allow clinics to set their own pricing. But historically, the average video consultation length on PetsApp was 7 minutes, 12 seconds. So somewhat, close to half of an ordinary consult length because you were missing out the physical exam. So I'd say the most common price point chosen was half the normal primary consultation fee. However, video consultations are taking longer now as vets attempt to approximate the physical examination through video consults. So they're trying to do more remotely, and we are seeing practices move towards the full consultation fee for these remote consultations. And actually, I think that's fair enough, and I think that's fair enough long term because there's a convenience factor here to the consultation. So I think that's good practice.
I think, Thom, I think that's a great point. I do have my view on this. I think that in the environment when we have physical appointments and when we have telemedicine appointments, there is a benefit and reduced cost of running the appointment. So that might have merit in designing those prices. But I think that right now in the crisis of losing the business and not having ability to provide regular appointments, if you price your appointments equally to what you price them in the regular times and provide equal value, I think that there's nothing wrong with charging the same. And I think the clients should understand that there's no discount because do you want a vet clinic to function after this is over? And most clients really have close relationship with their vet and they would understand. And I don't think they expect you to discount. Don't discount where people are not asking for it. And that's what I learned in business is it's not, if there's no demand, there's still a demand. If you see the drop in the appointments because of the price, you will see the drop in the appointment because people don't like to be on video. But if they drop in the price because I'm paying the same that I was paying when I was visiting the hospital, then maybe to reduce the price. So Thom.
Yeah, so I should cover off the nuance there where some clinics offer a mechanic where if they do need to come into the clinic, then it will be a second consult or a discounted consult. Some clinics are bundling. More and more you see Pet Health Club's wellness plans, including unlimited free consultations, and so they'll bundle those in there. The other point to make is, again, let's not make the video consult overly special. We do see a lot of engagement and a lot of interaction by text chat, where clinics are sharing videos, photos, PDFs, and the pet owners are sharing the same back and forth. Is this a monetizable interaction? And if you're delivering value, you really should be seeking to monetize your professional time and your expertise. So worth looking at that too.
Thanks, Thom. And we'll take the last one since we're on the top of the hour. I've heard that a lot of practices are not taking on remote communications, clients and staff, that is easily due to use of home devices for work. GDPR in UK. Any words of wisdom on that? Julien, you are our GDPR.
I'm not really a GDPR specialist, but it's definitely a concern that they should address. Ideally, if there is personal data of client, yeah, ideally it should be done on a device that is fully controlled by the practice.
Thom, you're also in the GDPR zone. Please contribute.
Yeah. So we want to be beyond compliance in everything we do. So we've had to wrap our heads around this as tiring and laborious as it is. The nice thing about having the app is people are actively choosing to download the app. So downloading app is opt-in. At sign up, you have opt-in. You have your privacy policy. You have your terms and conditions, and they have to agree to those. They have to opt in to allow notifications on their Apple devices. And then when we have the inbound call screen, we actually present to the owner, as stated in the privacy policy, and the clinicians know this as well, that the call is being recorded. So you do want to take GDPR seriously, but it is not there to stop you providing this vital service to pets and keeping your teams engaged in their patient advocacy efforts. So don't see it as an insurmountable hurdle, just get the advice and help you need with it.
And I think to be practical, like practical and level-headed needs to prevail. You've got a business to run. Take care of yourself.
Julien?
I think that the question was more on the clinic side. I mean, the fact that the owners agree to the term and condition, that's one thing. But I think the question was more on the practice staff using some personal device from home. And I also think it
applies both ways, hey?
Sorry?
It applies both ways. Those veterinary team members have to opt in as well, would have to go through you have the same duty of care to their data privacy and their data protection as a pet owner. So it's very similar procedures that you need to put in place for them.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to cut it off here on the questions. Just another teaser on the upcoming podcast by Dr. Carol. Erica Carroll, that created this article on employee utilization and workflow for veterinary clinics during COVID-19. We're going to have her on the podcast. She's going to talk about the workforce division. She's going to talk about the work flow proposal, and with actually some scenarios on a specific condition. So what would the workflow look like? And I think it's an amazing piece of information, and we will have her here as a guest. I want to thank everybody who joined us for this webinar. We can probably do something like this. If you guys like this, please sign up for the channel, and we have the emails of those